personalities post-independence of industrial era whose participation in the making of India has been pivotal. You may or may not be in agreement on some of his decisions, but he cannot be ignored from the pages of history. And today, when we have Sharmistha providing a true window to some of his reflections on, as she said, people and events, I think it provides an entirely new dimension to our understanding of his personality. So, I thank Sharmistha for writing the book, and it's a great honor and privilege for me to be in conversation with her. The book has created quite an earthquake for some of the comments made in it, quoting his diary. It is significant that except for Mr. Chidambaram, I don't see anyone else from the Congress here. Perhaps one reason is that while he was one of the most staunchly loyal Congress persons, he had his own assessment of people, and his own career in the Congress party was not without its moments of ups and downs. So let me get into the meat of it, because our time is limited. You all have the book, you get time to read it. It's been discussed a lot, it's been in the news, excerpts have been carried by newspapers. Sharmistha, why do you think your father wanted you to publish this or look at it posthumously?
Well, firstly, obviously because of the reason, because as some of you who have gone through the quotes or have seen it in the media, he has given his very, frank opinion about certain people within Congress, and obviously being in Congress, it was not possible for him to do. So if I was in Congress, I quit politics 2 years back, obviously I also wouldn't have been able to do so, because being within a party, one has to abide by some degree of discipline. And posthumously, yes, because he being an astute politician, he definitely knew that it is going to create a lot of controversy, lot of stir. So he just left me to face that controversy.
He could have used his diaries to write his own account of the period of which he was a part of history.
Of course he did that, and his last book in his four-volume autobiography, The Presidential Year, as Kapish mentioned, though it was published posthumously, and but Baba has written every word of it. He has even the cover was approved by him. But as anybody who would know my father, he was restrained in his speech, and he was always very politically correct. But I guess he realized that I wouldn't have such qualms, perhaps. So maybe that's why he left it to me, left it on me. And he never asked me, he never told me that, you have to do it. He just left it on me that, whatever you want to do with it, you do it.
How much of it have you read?
Well, there are, 51 volumes. In 51 volumes, and that is also certain diaries are missing. His early day diaries, the earliest one I have is of 1972. And in between about 8 volumes from 78 to 85, it got destroyed during a flooding in our personal residence, They were kept in a basement, so it just all got destroyed. So, but still that 51 volumes, because, towards the later period of his life, he would also write normally he would just write 1 or maximum 2 pages a day. But later on, when he had more time, he would also write lengthy explanations about his thoughts. So it is just not possible to capture everything in one volume. So that's why I said that it has been very selective about in terms of not only his views on people or about selecting events, but it is not that, for example, if I am talking about Rahul Gandhi, it's not that I have edited out anything, and to be very honest, there are few references of Rahul Gandhi, very few references of Rahul Gandhi. So I haven't tried to tweak around with the gist of his sentiments about his views about any particular event or any particular personality. But yes, there are many references of his interaction with Dr. Manmohan Singh, with Sonia Gandhi. I said so there are so many years of interaction, so it is just not possible to put everything. So of course I had to edit out many things, but not the gist of his sentiments.
So let's begin not from the early part of his life, because that's really part of his autobiography. But his career really took off under the late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. He was a relatively unknown congressman who had won from West Bengal, initially appointed as a deputy minister, but a person as astute as Mrs. Gandhi somehow placed disproportionate trust in him. And it came to a point where he was the de facto number 2 in the cabinet and sometimes would preside over the cabinet in her absence. Why do you think she chose him?
No, my father, if there is one political personality towards whom my father's personal loyalty lied, that was Mrs. Indira Gandhi. It began and ended with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. After that, he served the party, he served Congress, but he did not serve any individual leader. And my father would always say that the Indira Gandhi period was the golden period of his life, because that is the time he was learning from Indira ji, he was simultaneously applying his skills, political, administrative. And strangely, by the way, Baba first got elected in 1967 as a Rajya Sabha member from Bangla Congress, which was a split away group of Congress, of the main Congress in West Bengal. And he came into the notice of Indira ji during his second speech in Parliament, that was on nationalization of banks. And Indira ji, I think, was really impressed, because next day in her speech, she quoted from him. And then, after, I think in 1972, Bangla Congress merged with Congress, that's a different history. But somehow from the very beginning, I think Indira ji kept an eye on Baba, and in 1972 when it merged, Baba became, I think, a deputy minister for the first time in February 1972. Then again he became the deputy minister of shipping and transport after a few months. After a few months he was giving an additional charge of steel and mining, and then after that he was being made the Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance, and then an independent charge of revenue and banking, all within a span of very few years. I think what impressed Indira ji was Baba's meticulous homework. I mean, he was always very meticulous in his studies, and but what, going through Baba's diaries, what I felt that it did not happen in one day. Of course, Indira ji gave him a lot of opportunities, and within very few years, he's kind of from one ministry to another, from deputy minister to state minister to independent charge. But I think the real bonding started happening post-emergency, after the debacle, which in 1977, and then with Indira ji was marginalized within her party, and then of course then there was a split, Congress I happened. So Indira ji was going through, and the people who were with Indira ji at that time were going through a very tough period and were isolated. And I think Baba's loyalties towards her is very, very clear from his diary entries. I remember one entry, he writes that it is there is no question of my leaving Congress or Indira ji. She picked me from outside, that is Bangla Congress, and she reposed her faith in me, and not only politically, but whenever for any personal issues I sought her advice, she always helped me. And if I leave her at her bad times, I will not only be able to ever face the public, but I will never be able to face myself. So he was very clear in his stance. And then he just, stood by her and thick and thin, and we all know the history of Congress that time. The many old stalwarts who once upon a time said India is Indira. They all left her. So I think as the old bonds were falling away, new bonds were created.
So do you think, am I audible? Yes. Do you think that his loyalty and personal gratitude to Mrs. Gandhi finessed his sense of the difference between right and wrong in his support for the emergency? I ask this because
Absolutely.
I don't think I have a mic.
Of your book, you write that on introspecting on the past, he felt that perhaps his loyalty to Indira, which was unflinching and for reasons which he explains, could have made him blind to some of her faults. Of course, the nation is very proud of her contribution, notwithstanding the emergency, but he, in a way, supported her through the emergency. But he later writes that perhaps his blind loyalties made him also blind to some of the aberrations she brought into the system, including a personality cult, including a basic authoritarian sort of non-democratic milieu within the Congress, and somehow the subversion of institutions. If I remember right, there is an entry in his diary. What is your reaction?
Well, my father himself has written at length in his first volume of his autobiography, The Dramatic Decade. And he's very openly and honestly said that, not only he, but anybody who was there within the Congress party, Congress government at that time, supported emergency. And here, when I would just like to say, 2 minutes about the emergency, obviously, there are two issues. One is the imposition of emergency itself and the conditions which led to emergency. And second part is, what happened during emergency, that the press censorship, the leaders, opposition leaders were put behind the bars. We all know about it. But what, as a lay person, and also I would say a Congress person, what not surprised me, but it was revealing to me to see that, what were the conditions that led to emergency. There was total anarchy in states. In state like Bihar, for example, there were arson, looting, continuous, disruption of public life. Even a union minister was assassinated. A judge, Supreme Court judge, there was an attempt to assassinate. So, under that, one has to see things in a historical perspective. Another thing, that emergency was a constitutional provision. So, the condition, while we are talking about the emergency, I personally think the conditions which led to the imposition of emergency, also is extremely important to understand. And the current narrative, every year, the emergency is 25th June, the day emergency was declared, is kind of being termed as a black day in Indian democracy. Everything is fine, but also one has to keep in mind why emergency, under what condition it was imposed.
So it had nothing to do with the High Court judgment.
Of course, High Court judge, everything led to another, and also the day emergency was imposed, don't forget that a person like Jayaprakash Narayan, who was an icon, he had this huge rally at Ramlila Maidan, and he told police not to obey the government. He asked the army that, you have to, before obeying the government, you have to ask your conscience. Now, if every policeman or every army person, before implementing any order of the government, if they pause to think whether it's right and wrong, that could be a moral issue, but can you imagine what kind of anarchy it would lead to? So one also has to see that. There are various combinations. But one thing, Indiraji herself, said that emergency was wrong. And we also have to understand that 3 years down the line, it is she who declared and who ensured a free and fair election. And because of that, from North, Congress was completely got wiped out. She did not, because, people close to her, they realized, in fact, there is a very interesting anecdote I have given in this, that when the elections were declared, my father asked her, she asked that how are we going to do? So Baba said, oh, we are going to win, with the confidence, arrogance of being a youth, the politician, young politician. Mrs. Gandhi said that we are going to get wiped out. And so Baba was a bit shaken and said, then why did you declare election? So she said, otherwise history would have never forgiven me. She was the daughter of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So somewhere she realized that she has made a mistake, and if she would have continued with emergency, that would have perhaps reached a point of no return and done some terrible damage to Indian democracy. So she made a mistake, but she realized it. And as far as my father is concerned, he also said, when he looks back, when you are within the system, many things you don't understand. But he said that yes, if I had the political maturity of what he had now in his later days, he felt that if a personal meeting between JP and Indiraji somehow could have been managed, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. That was his point of view. But yes, he also had admitted in his book, in his diaries, that it was definitely an avoidable event.
From his time onwards, there came about what is now famously called the trust deficit between the Gandhi Parivar and Pranab Babu. There is a famous story of the journey back from Kolkata after the tragic assassination of Indiraji, and the supposed role Pranab Babu played in not immediately endorsing Rajiv Gandhi as successor. I think your book clarifies that, but briefly, can you tell us whether there is any truth in that supposition?
As far as my father's perspective, his side of the story, that there was no truth. On the contrary, he thought, the situation was very abnormal. A prime minister was assassinated. Unlike Pandit Nehru or unlike Lal Bahadur Shastri, who died a natural death, so there was, there was an interim prime minister, Gulzariwala Nanda became the interim prime minister, but at that time a prime minister has been assassinated, a lot of uncertainty has been created. So there was no scope of any squabble within the party, and he himself thought that it's best to have Rajiv as the Prime Minister. And that time, Balram Thakur, Bandar Ghani Khan Chowdhury, Sheila Dikshit, Uma Shankar Dikshit, they were all there. So they decided that Rajiv will be made the Prime Minister. And Baba also talked to Rajiv that you should take over right away. So and then he said, do you think I can manage it? So as per Baba, he said, yes, we are all there with you. And as per Baba's notes, he did not mention it in his book, but as per his notes, there was one particular leader, Barkan, as rightly or wrongly, he thought it was Barkat Ghani Khan Chowdhury who actually planted this story, and then this story was taken up by other people. And even P.C. Alexander, who was the principal secretary at that time, he wrote in his book that some people tried to spread a canard that Baba was taking his claim, but which was obviously done to create misunderstanding between Rajiv and Pranab Mukherjee. This is one aspect. Second aspect, the mistrust. Again, from Baba's notes, he has left very lengthy notes which was probably meant for his memoir and which he has used a lot but left out certain very crucial things. So as per his notes and as per his own analysis, the main reason behind this trust deficit was his own very assertive personality and
Your father.
yes, my father's, and his non-subservient attitude towards Rajiv Gandhi during the 2 months period, when they worked together. He himself wrote that, when I look back, it was written somewhere in 1985, but when I look back, I think Rajiv was correct in not taking me in his cabinet because he realized that I'm a tough nut and I don't toe the line blindly. And as per him, that was something which perhaps made Rajiv Gandhi hesitant. He has given many examples also, and which is there. And as late as 1989, I remember it was an entry on 15th August 1989, P. Shiv Shankar, who was a very senior leader, senior minister in both Indiraji's and Rajiv's cabinet, he came to meet Baba, and as per Mr. Shiv Shankar, the reason of Rajiv not taking him was, he was told, as per Mr. Shiv Shankar, that Rajiv was told by all my father's early colleagues that, there was an apprehension that he might challenge Rajiv's authority. And that was the reason he was not taken.
But when Mr. Chaudhary in the plane asked him what's the next step, your father was the foremost constitutional authority. Did he speak about the fact that there could be first like
Raoji gave him the responsibility, asked him to become the deputy chairperson of the planning commission. And Baba said, I'll think about it. He said, you can think as much as you want, but you have to join on Monday. So
that relationship went well. Because time is short, I want you to take you to some of the pivotal and more controversial issues. His relationship with Sonia Gandhi. At one level, it stabilized. She began to depend upon him. But at two crucial moments, I'll come to Rahul Gandhi after this. But at two crucial moments, I think he records and says candidly that the trust deficit is a factor. Now, it's a great mystery to me that this trust deficit continued over generations. There was Rahul Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi who internalized it but later admitted that he was wrong. How did it continue with Sonia ji?
well, it's the same generation. They were husband and wife.
Yeah, but do you think that?
Well, it is absolutely possible that this will continue because, husband-wife, it's a very, very close relationship. And obviously, they would influence each other. And as I said that, anybody again who has worked with my father, they knew that he had a very assertive personality and a mind of his own. Having a mind of his own is okay, but having a mind of his own combined with a lethal combination of political knowledge and understanding, experience, expertise of governance, understanding of politics, those kind of people will never toe the line blindly. So, in fact, once much later, I asked my father about it, that whether, it is why because of this trust deficit. So he said that, everybody in the cutthroat world of politics, everybody tries to safeguard their own interest, and Sonia ji was trying to safeguard her own and her family's interest. And
so did they consider him a threat?
And yeah, when I asked him that would you have posed that threat to her? So he said that whether I would or would not have is not the question. But she thought that I might have challenged her authority. So what's there to argue about it? My Baba, how could he could cut short an argument whenever he wanted to. So I think it is fine, because in that sense, nobody, perhaps Sonia ji definitely trusted him enough to give him enormous responsibility. Only she can answer, but this also could be that, she perhaps felt that Baba is going to challenge her authority some way or the other. So these are all speculations. The final answer, the true answer can be only be given by Sonia Gandhi.
So all this trust that you mentioned that he had, it was pretty obvious he had a key role in government, was part of a collective, properly wrapped, ribboned consolation prize.
What consolation prize? I'm sorry.
I mean, all this collective responsibility.
No, I don't think so. I don't.
Because she chose Dr. Manmohan Singh over him, and a lot of people felt
I don't see it as a consolation prize at all. Because being the defense minister, being the finance minister, being the external minister, being head of so many GOMs, and finally being the president of India, it's definitely not.
That's not come to the president of India.
So all these key responsible positions, I mean, they can't be called consolation prize. And let's be also be very clear. It is not that my father did not deserve it. He deserved every position that he had because he worked for it. He earned it. So it's not that it was given to him as charity or as a consolation prize. He earned every position he got.
But he writes that he was asked to choose his portfolio, and he said finance or home. And to his own utter surprise, on the day of this very thing, he was made Raksha Mantri. And he came back and wrote that this is one area which I am not familiar with at all. Why do you think that was done?
Well, I don't know why. Again, Sonia ji will be able to. But what Sonia ji told him, that other than you, nobody can clear the mess what is there at Raksha and at the defense ministry. So it is in a way a big compliment. So somewhere I feel that, Sonia ji also knew how to, deal a blow gently. बोलते हैं ना जोर का झटका धीरे से लगे. It's like that.
But
Yes, it was my father was absolutely really surprised because he was actually, he was wanting home because he was also the chairperson of the parliamentary committee at home, the standing committee or, whatever the technical term is. So he understood the issues. So, there are so many things, so many mysteries, so many things, and as I said, so many people involved. So I can only say, and also, I am not the participant in this. I only learned it from Baba's diaries or whatever he told me, and that is also, whenever you read the diary or whenever anybody reads a book, you also make your own interpretation out of it. So it's filtered through my own interpretation. So what actually happens, perhaps, I don't know, maybe Sonia ji will be able to say, and if she ever writes her own autobiography, we will know many things.
With his relationship with Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, in spite of the fact that when he was finance minister in 1982, he appointed him the governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and now in a sense he was serving under him. Prime Minister he was the Prime Minister. But surprisingly they got on quite well. There were occasional hiccups in the cabinet, and Mr. Sridharam would be probably aware of them. But there was a relationship of mutual respect between them.
Absolutely, and there was exemplary courtesy shown to my father by Dr. Singh, and many people thought that perhaps he resented working under Dr. Singh. That is absolutely untrue because even in his own book, he has written the kind of autonomy he had working under Dr. Manmohan Singh, and he had worked under P.V. Narasimha Rao, Indira Gandhi. He never got that kind of autonomy, and Dr. Manmohan Singh, I think there was a very strong mutual respect and understanding. And another thing, going through my father's diaries over the years, what I realized that, between whether it's with Sonia ji, whether it's with Dr. Manmohan Singh, obviously there were bound to be differences, working for so many years together under such high pressure circumstances, situations. there are bound to be, differences, and my father always used to say not necessarily we need to agree on everything every time. So, I read many instances of heated exchange of words, spark flying, cold shouldering, but after a while it became normal. So, what was the most important thing I felt?
I think your father's reaction was one of complete shock, even anger. And he asked the question, who does he think he is? To assume to himself this kind of theatrical arbitrariness.
You are absolutely right, and I was the unfortunate one to give him the news. And after a long time, I saw my father getting so angry, and he started shouting at me as if I trashed ordinance. So, the point of it that Rahul Gandhi was not a member of the cabinet. It was his government. The Prime Minister was abroad. So, I think anybody would agree that it was an extremely, not only a very, very immature act politically, but also an extremely arrogant act. To crash a decision of the cabinet.
Why the Prime Minister?
And even if the Prime Minister was in the country, he is being outside, that added a different dimension, a much greater dimension. But actually, who was he, other than being Rahul Gandhi, who was he to crash a cabinet in public? Within the party forum, he could have said anything. And if he had the political maturity, if he had the political, if he had that logical mind, why couldn't he convince his party colleagues not to go for the ordinance? And to be very honest, principally my father was also against the ordinance, and he asked his former colleagues and that, what is the rush? You wanted that ordinance in such a grave matter, it should be brought by proper, discussion through the forum of the parliament. So, but the way Rahul Gandhi did it, I think, he was right, totally right in, questioning, and he wrote in his diary that day that this boy has got all the arrogance of his Gandhi Nehru lineage without their political acumen.